I'm Michelle from Ascent Bath & Body, here in collaboration with Cosy Owl. In this video I'm going to show you how to make your own handmade soap. I'm going to use a pre-manufactured soap base, so it's going to be super easy to make. If you ever fancy making your own handmade soap but not knowing where to start, then Melt and Pour is a great product for beginner soap makers. You don't have to wait for your soap to cure, there's no handling of lye or sodium hydroxide, and you can make some really cool and fun designs. So let's get started.
Okay, so here is everything that you need to make your handmade soap. First of all, we have our soap base, and this comes in a 1 kilogram tub, and we're using the standard white base for this project. Then we have our silicone soap mould, and this has got 6 soap cavities, and it's got a really cute honeycomb and bee design. Then we have our melting jug to melt down the soap base, our thermometer. I'm using an infrared one, but a normal cooking thermometer would work just as well. A spray bottle which contains rubbing alcohol, which is used towards the end to get rid of any bubbles in our finished soap. Bottle of fragrance oil, and I've chosen the honey fragrance from Cosy Owl as I thought this would work really well with the bee mould. Weighing scales to weigh our soap base, rubber spatula for stirring, a sharp knife for cutting down our soap base, chopping board for chopping the soap base onto, and I've got my pot of boiling water and my induction hob which creates my bain-marie. Also, as you can see, I'm wearing gloves. So the first thing that we need to do is to remove the soap base from its packaging. So you just need to pull the sides of the tub away from the side of the soap base just to break the seal a little bit, and then pop the tub upside down, press down with your thumbs, and the soap base should just slip out. Now, it's always a good idea to chop your soap base into small chunks. This makes it easier to handle, it'll melt down much quicker and much more evenly. Chunks about this size are perfect. Now, the soap mould that we're using has 6 cavities in it, and each of those cavities takes around about 100 grams of soap, so we'll need 600 grams for this. Okay, so we'll get our scale and we'll pop the jug on, making sure that we tie the scale back to 0 so we're weighing accurately, and we'll pop the chunks into the jug. Okay, we've got about 600 grams there, so we'll get our leftover soap base and put it back into the tub, ready for next time, and we'll pop our jug into our double boiler, ready to melt down. Now, I've got my heat currently on 140, which is probably a tiny bit high. I normally have it between 80 and 100, but it often depends on the size of the jug that I'm using and how much soap base I've got to melt down. You can also use an electric or a gas hob for this, and you probably need to have it on a low to medium heat. You don't want it to melt too quickly and burn, and you don't want it to melt too slowly, else it'll take ages. So you might just need to play around to see what works for you. Okay, I can see it's starting to melt now, so I'm just going to have a look, and often you find that it does sometimes clump together in the bottom of the jug. So if that happens, then just take your spatula and just carefully try to break the pieces apart. Okay, I'm now going to come in and do a temperature check because I can see that it's just about melted. So I'm currently at 63.8, which is absolutely fine. Now, this kind of soap base tends to start melting at around 60 degrees, but you don't really want to take it to any more than 75 if you can do, because after that point it can scorch or burn, and it can discolour the soap base, and it also means that it won't take your fragrance oil as well. Now, if you're going to use a microwave to melt down your soap, then I would suggest that you do it in 20 to 30 second bursts, and check it after each one of those and give it a gentle stir. Also, if you are using a microwave to melt your soap base down, then I would suggest that you take it out of the microwave once you've just got some tiny little pieces left at the bottom, particularly if you haven't got the thermometer to test the temperature with accurately. But if you've still got some small pieces left in the bottom, then you know that you haven't burnt or overheated your base. Okay, so I'm going to have another look and just a little stir. And I can see that there's just some tiny little pieces left at the bottom, so it's just about there. So I'm going to turn the heat off now and just let the base sit in the hot water just for a couple of minutes, just to melt down those final pieces. Now, if you don't have a thermometer with you, then this is a good time to take the jug off the heat altogether so that you make sure that you don't burn your soap base. But if you've got a thermometer, then obviously you can measure the temperature quite accurately. Okay, so while we're waiting for that to fully melt, I'm just going to talk to you about the fragrance oil. Now, generally you would aim to add the fragrance oil at around 60 degrees. So if you've heated it to a little bit over, then you'll have to wait for the temperature to come down a little bit. You can add it a little bit hotter than 60, but try not to go too much higher than that, otherwise you'll find that you burn the fragrance oil off and you won't be able to smell it in your finished soap. You'll also need to check the flash point of your fragrance oil, and all those details are on Cosy Owl's website. You wouldn't want to add the fragrance oil at any higher temperature than the flash point. I think this one's 95, and this one's quite a high flash point, so we're okay. Also, for the rule of thumb, you want to be adding 2% fragrance oil into your soap base. If you check the IFRA statement on Cosy Owl's website, it'll tell you what you can add. You're looking for section 9A, which is for wash-off products, which is what soap comes under. Sometimes you will find that the IFRA statement will say that you can add more, but generally if you're going to sell your soaps and you're going to get cosmetic safety assessments, the assessor generally won't let you add any more than 2, so stick to 2. If your IFRA statement says less than 2, so for example if it says 1.5%, then obviously you'll need to stick to that too. But as a good rule of thumb, 2% should be about right. It gives a nice final finish, final fragrance in the soap, and you're not going to be worrying about any skin sensitivity at 2%. So I'm just going to go in and have a final check of the soap. I can see that just about all those little chunks have just about disappeared now. There's a couple of tiny ones left, so we'll just give it another stir for just another few seconds, just to make sure that they've fully melted down. Come in and do a final temperature check, and I'm at 64 at the moment, so I'm going to take this out of the water now, and I'm just going to give it a final stir. When you are stirring your soap base, make sure that you don't stir it too fast or too vigorously. You don't want to introduce too many bubbles into it at this stage, because they can be quite difficult to get rid of. Okay, I think we're just about there. I think all the little chunks have fully dissolved now, so I'll just do a final temperature check, and we're at 61.8, so we're nearly ready to add fragrance oil. So I'll just leave it for just a couple more minutes, just for it to cool down slightly. Okay, one last check, and we're at 61, so I think we're just about ready to add the fragrance oil, because it will keep cooling. So remembering to tower our scale again so we can weigh accurately. And remember that we had 600 grams of soap base and we can add 2% of fragrance, so therefore we'll be needing to add 12 grams of fragrance oil to the base. So pour that in gently. Okay, that's 12. So we'll then need to stir this fragrance oil in really well. I normally stir it for about 30 seconds, just so that there's no pockets of neat fragrance oil left at all in the base. Okay, I think that should be ready, and we're now ready to fill our soap moulds. So because this is quite a detailed mould, we want to start the pour off quite slowly, just to make sure that we get in all the corners and all the nooks and crannies in the mould. So pour just gently over the bottom of the mould, just making sure it's all filled up, and then fill the mould up to the top. You can go back to top any of the cavities up if you need to. Okay, so now you can see we've got some bubbles on the surface of the soap. So this is where we use our rubbing alcohol. Now when you first open this, you'll think this smells really strong, but because it's 99.9% pure alcohol, it will evaporate almost immediately, so you won't smell this in your finished soap. So just gently spray across the surface of the soap, and then you'll see that the bubbles pop and they disappear. So now we just need to leave these to set. For this kind of cavity mould, I would normally leave them at least 45 minutes until they're fully set and they're cold to the touch. Because we're using quite a detailed mould, then we do want to make sure these are fully set, else we might lose some of the details on the mould when we pull the soap out. So we're ready to take them out of the mould. So because this silicone mould, we just need to pull it gently away from the sides of the soap, press underneath with your fingers, and the soap should just pop out. And there you can see our handmade soap. And because we poured really slowly at the beginning, you can see all those lovely details have come out. We've got all the honeycomb design and the little bee design, and I think they look fantastic. So you need to give yourself a pat on the back now, because you've made your first bars of handmade soap.